Hi Year 3, this is your Thursday computing session and I hope that you found last week's one interesting. So last week's computing lesson you were having a look at how communicating with other people online could be safe and making sure that you're keeping safe online. I think it's really important now, especially with all of us having, well, a lot of us having to learn from home or talking to each other on Teams, just making sure we're staying safe on there. So today's one is also about staying safe. It's going to be looking at emails. So the learning objective for today's computing lesson is, can I safely send and receive emails? Now, I want you to just have a think for a moment before we start. We've been sending emails. We did some in our computing lessons before in school. We had a school email address. Can you have a think of any way that you ensure that you stayed safe with those email addresses? We will come on to this later on. But just have a think in your head. If you pause the video now, just have a quick think about how you stayed safe using your school email addresses and your school emails to each other. Okay, so who uses email? Why do we use it and who is it useful for? Most adults now use emails every week or even every day, depending on their job. And they send emails because they're nice and quick. They're quick and easy to write and send. It's much quicker to communicate with email rather than with a letter. With emails, you also have a record of what's been said, unlike with a phone call. So before we had the internet, years and years ago, we would have to write a letter if we wanted to communicate with someone. We didn't have phones, we couldn't send a text, we couldn't send an email, we'd have to send a letter. And you can imagine that could take quite a few days to receive a letter. So an email is a nice and quick way of doing it. It's also, like it says here, better than talking to someone on the phone sometimes because it tracks down what you've said. So, for example, if I spoke to someone on the phone, if I spoke to Miss Gossage and said, "Hi, Miss Gossage, can you please make sure that the math is all marked before tomorrow?" Then the next day I say, "Miss Gossage, why isn't the maths marked before tomorrow?" She said, "Well, you didn't tell me to." And I've got no evidence that I did. However, if I wrote an email to Miss Gossage, then I could look back in the email and I go, "Yes, here on my email, I definitely asked you to do that." So the email is quite good because it leaves a trail. You can track down what you said to people. And also sometimes if you've forgotten if you said something to someone, you can look at your emails to check. So that can be really useful. And we've got, this is our logo for Gmail. We've been using Outlook sometimes as well. Is it safe? So we've been focusing a lot on staying safe online the last few weeks. So I want you to talk to your teddy or the adult with you, and I want you to discuss the following question. Is emailing safe? I want you to have a think. Is it safer than sending a letter? Is it always safe to open an email? Could other people see your email? And what could an email contain? So have a quick think about what you think about safety of emailing. And if you need to get a whiteboard or a scrap piece of paper and jot down your ideas, that's absolutely fine because you're going to need that for later on anyway. So write down why you think it could be safe and why you think maybe it couldn't be safe. Have a think. Is it safer than sending a letter? Is it always safe to open an email? What could an email contain? Okay, let's carry on. So there's some basic rules to follow when deciding if an email is safe to open. So when you receive an email, you need to decide, first of all, do I want to open this? Because sometimes some people could send unkind things in an email. So you could get someone who you know might send you an email and actually it's a bit unkind message, a bit like what we were saying last week when some people can write unkind things to people in your online communities. It could be the same with an email. You've got to decide if you want to see it. Or some people, when you're older, some people send you emails that someone you don't know might send you an email and it sends something called a virus and they send something to your computer and it can cause lots of issues with your computer, which is a nightmare to solve. And that can cause a lot of issues as well. So they won't be safe emails either. So here are some rules to follow to try to keep you safe. If you know the sender and the subject is something that seems normal, it will likely be safe to open. So if you can see that the person who sent it, you know the name of, and if the subject, and we've done this in our English, when we wrote our emails to the Queen and the BFG about the giants, we had our subject column. You'll try and remember that. We had that in the top of it. So, and I'll show you the example in a moment. You have to write down in the subject what you were writing it about. So if I received an email from Miss Amanpour and the subject was maths planning, it's probably a safe email to open. But if it was from someone I didn't know, or the subject seemed a bit strange, then I might not open it. If it's from a company that you know the email address looks correct and the subject seems normal, it will likely be safe to open. However, here are some warning signs that it might not be a good idea to open. An unknown or strange looking email address. So if you see an email address and you've never heard of that person before, it's probably not a safe email to open. An email address pretending to be something else. So instead of it saying Miss Lewis at langleyacademyprimary.org, the address might say mi.s.s at langleyacademyprimary.org. So they've added some dots in there. Now that's not my name. They've added some dots. So again, it's a strange email address to receive from. And also some spelling mistakes in the subject or a strange subject title. So this isn't to scare you. Obviously, when we emailed each other, we knew that we were receiving emails from our friends, and that's because it was safe in school. And I'll explain how we did that in a moment. This is outside of school, maybe when you're older, or if you're emailing when you're an adult or when you go to secondary school, or if you're emailing people now, just being careful of anything you might receive. And if you're unsure, I'd always ask an adult just to double check. So I'm going to show you some emails, and I want you to decide whether they're safe to open or not. And I'd like you to write down your answer on a whiteboard or on a scrap piece of paper, what one you think, if you think you should open them or you shouldn't. Try to remember the rules that I've just gone through in the previous slide. So do you recognize the name of the person? Does the subject look normal? Is there a subject? Do you recognize the email address at all? Let's have a look. Okay, so here are my emails. So I've got 5 emails here. So my first one is from someone called Ethan. And it's about football on Tuesday. So if you imagine that you play football with a group of people at the weekend and one of those children is called Ethan, then that email, have a think whether you think it's going to be safe to do. This one is from Greg Smith 4786 at email.mail, and there's no subject. There's one from me, Miss Lewis, and it says maths revision. One from a girl called Zara, but there's no subject. And there's one from someone who I don't know called Lisa Richards. And it just says click here. Okay, so I like to write down which ones you think you would open because you think they're safe and which ones you don't think are safe. Now have a look carefully over here. There's a little clue. Your friends are Zara, Ethan and Poppy. Now I don't think Poppy came up in these ones, but Ethan and Zara did. So maybe that will help you know whether they're safe or not if they're from Zara and Ethan. What clues are there that the email is safe or unsafe to open? So when you've written, for example, if I say I would open Ethan's email, I want you to explain why and write a sentence to explain why. And then the same with the other 4 as well. Okay, so pause the video now and give that a go. Okay, so this is how we write an email. Now we've looked at this example before when we did our English. And we had our to, so this is who you'd be emailing to. The subject, that's what your email is going to be about. And sometimes it has the from, or that one sometimes automatically goes in that box because you're emailing it from your email account. And you would then write your message. So the subject doesn't have to be filled. It can be sent without a subject. But subject helps people recognize what the email is going to be about, whether they can open it, whether they want to open it, or they might think, oh, that's important, but I need to make sure I open that tomorrow, not now. So you're writing the email address or addresses you are sending it to in the to bar. So again, you could have more than one person. And when we were writing our English lesson, I know that my class especially, we had our CC, who we were copying it to, and our BCC. Can you remember what that stood for? Can you pause the video? What did BCC stand for and why did we have it? Okay, so BCC meant it was blind. That means that if I wanted to email Miss Gossage and Miss Amanpour, and I also wanted to copy in Mrs. Bowen, but they didn't need to see that I'd copied in Mrs. Bowen. I would BCC Mrs. Bowen in. And then you could CC other people. That's one way that emails could be a little bit dangerous because sometimes other people can see an email and the other people who have received the email don't know that. It's just something to be a bit wary of. Write a short title for the email in the subject bar that gives the recipient, that's the person who's receiving the email, a clue as to what the message is about. Think about who you are sending the email to, just like a letter. You may need to be more formal depending on who you are writing to. If you're writing to a friend, you could just say, Dear Leia, if you were writing to Leia, who is your friend. Or you might need to write more formally. So you might write, Dear Miss Gossage. If you're writing to an adult or someone it needs to be a more formal letter, you might address them that way. So, should you have an email address? It's important to remember that most email providers have age restrictions. Usually you cannot have your own email address until you are about 13 years old. Sometimes it's different though. If you need to use an email address to contact someone, you could ask to do it with your parents' email address. You might also be able to have an email address on a closed network. Your school may set you up an email address, which you can use to email other people in your school. Now, that's what we did. So when we were emailing each other, after we managed to log in on Teams in the computer room, you could only email people in the school. And that kept you safe so that you weren't able to email people outside of school, but also people outside of school weren't able to email you. So that's how we kept you safe, was that your school email address only allows you to email people in a closed network. So that's just only in Langley Academy Primary. So when it says, should you have an email address, it depends on what the rules are for the email company. Depends what your parents think. It also depends on what restrictions you think you should have or your parents think you should have. Your parents want to keep you safe. We want to keep you safe. So that's why in school, we allowed it only so that you could talk to each other in school. So that could be maybe a little conversation you could have with people. Okay, so today's activity, after you've done the ones that you've already looked at, your task. So I'd like you to choose either activity 1 or activity 2. Activity 1 says I want you to list down the features of an email. So that would be things like the address, whether it's BCC, etc. Or activity 2, I'd like you to write an email on a piece of paper using the following layout. And this is the layout down here like we showed you before. And you can also add CC or BCC if you'd like to. And when you're writing your email, I'd like you to write an email to your friend or your teacher about whether you think we should have emails or not, and why. And then if you've chosen activity 2, which I think a lot of you can do, I'd like you to choose activity 2 if you think you can do that one. I think most of you could do that one. I want you to go on to activity 3, which says then write down the rules on having an email address. So think of all the rules of staying safe, making sure that you're opening the correct emails, making sure you're not upsetting anyone by sending emails, and also following the rules of if we can have an email address. So think about all the different rules and write those down as well. Okay, that is the end of our staying safe section of this. Now, I want to talk to you very quickly about another part of computing, and that's because we are looking at times table rockstars, and it's only going to be a 2-minute, very quick introduction of times table rockstars. A lot of you have done it already, and since checking that you've got your logins, I've looked on there, and so many of you are now playing times table rockstars, which is fantastic to help you with your times tables. So I'm going to very quickly show you what it looks like. So this is my login. And my login, I'm called Mindy Floyd on here. That's the name of my rockstar. Now, when you come on here, you can play times table rockstars by choosing where you want to play it, and you can play it against each other. You can play it with different people, and you can play it and you can earn coins. Now, your class teacher will have set for you which times tables you're going to be practicing. So some of you may have only 3 times tables to practice. It might just be your 2 5s and 10s to start with. Some of you may have your 3s and your 4s as well. Some of you might only have your 10 times tables. That's fine. And each week that might change. So this week I might have some children who are working on their 2s and their 5s, and next week they might also be working on their 3s. So it may change. Your questions will only be about those times tables. When you've finished some of the games, you collect coins. And then what you can do is you can go to the shop and you can spend some of these coins on new backgrounds. You can spend it on different bodies, different eyes, different mouths, different instruments, different clothes. It's your decision how you spend the coins that you earn, but you have to earn those coins. Now, the reason I'm telling you this today is because at 2 o'clock today, there is a tournament starting. The tournament is between Pankhurst, Mandela, and Gandhi. Now I'm filming this earlier than this lesson, so for me it says it starts in 21 hours, but for you it's starting at 2 p.m. today. Depending on when you've watched this, it's starting on the 28th, that's the Thursday, at 2 p.m. There is a tournament and it's going on until the 1st, that's Monday. It's going on until then, and you'll be able to see when you log in, you'll be able to see how much better each class is doing from each other, and it's to see who gets the most. Now, as being teacher of Pankhurst, I obviously think Pankhurst will win, but Miss Gossage thinks that Gandhi will win, and Miss Amanpour and Miss Williams think Mandela will win. Pankhurst are going to win, but I need you to log in. I need you to practice as much as you can, and I'm able to see, and your class teacher are able to see if you've been on, and let's see who's going to win the tournament. And then what we'll do is I'll set up different tournaments, and I will try and let you know when they are, and see if you can beat each other. So that's the end of your computing lesson. Go through the activities for your emails first, and then really have a go at being able to log into Times Table Rockclass to practice, because your times tables are so important to help you with all the other maths that you've got. Good luck, and hopefully the best class, Pankhurst, will win. Come on. Bye, Year 3.